What's up everyone, welcome back. My name is Mark and this is Mark's Coding Projects. This is video number 22 and in today's video we're going to be working on the client side of our Reconnecting games. So if you remember in the last tutorial we set up our opponent response method. So this was deciding whether or not the opponent wanted to accept our game request, and that's all set up on the server side. So in today's video, this is going to be the client side. So at the moment, all of this information that we've set up, so output to client, input from client, all of that business, it's all going to the client. Obviously, that's fine, but the client has no way of receiving it and the client has no way of using it at any point. So we need to set it up today. I think it's going to be a fairly simple tutorial in terms of we're not going to be developing anything new, but I think we will be making some changes to what we already have. So my thinking at the moment is that the output, for example, and our input, these have different return types, potentially different parameters in the case of output, but the general gist of what it's doing is the same thing. And I'm wondering is it possible to have just a single input method and a single output method? And the answer to that is I don't know. So my plan for this video is going to be to try and maybe redo what we've got so that we can have less methods and write less code and just use what we have more effectively. So first of all, I think I'm going to try and redo our input. So if you look at these two methods, this method here, it creates an input stream, it gets a buffered reader, and it reads the data into a string. Pretty much exactly the same as what this one does. And part of me thinks, should we just read all of the data into strings and then process that string when it comes to actually executing the method? And that I don't know. So I'm going to try it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to change our input player to a string first and foremost. So I'm going to change the return type of input player to a string. I'm going to leave the parameters the same, leave the IO exception, all of that. And I'm going to just remove this parseInt business. So I'm going to change this to a string, which, there we go. And then what I think I'm going to do, at the top here, we're now going to have a red line. Yeah, so this is a string variable, not an integer. Sorry, this is a string variable, not an integer. This is still an integer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the line that we had where counter was converted to an integer, and we're going to put it up here instead. Integer to parse int. If I can spell, which I can't. There we go. Parse int, and then what's the method? It's input player. Boom. Cool. Okay, so that has now been reconfigured so that it returns a string. I think that should work successfully. The question is, can we do the same thing with our other input method? So can we move our for loops outside of this method? Because if we can, then we can just call input player rather than having to have a separate method. So I'm going to change the return type. So I'm going to start off simple, change the return type. Okay, and then I'm going to remove this. Actually, we need to just remove the entire array. So I'm just going to make a string. What we're going to do? No, we're going to get rid of this line completely. We are going to, we'll just return counter space actually. Remove game board entirely, remove the for loops. And then counter space. So you notice now that these two the code for both of these methods is identical. It's just we're leaving them as different in case this doesn't work. So where is my first error? Set game board. What's wrong with that? Oh, okay. So yeah, set game board calls an integer. Okay, now this is doable. This is doable. So what I think we need to do is under here we need to create a new method which will return a 2D array, and we'll call it produce board. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our string as a parameter, and we're going to copy the code that we had in our input method, and we are going to place it into our produce board, and then that way the receival of the data is in the same method. However, we can manipulate it in this standalone method. So we need two for loops. We need an integer array. I've not done that correctly. 7 by 6. Okay, so the way I'm thinking at the moment is I believe that every time we load a number into our string, and it's not an integer, notice it's a number, so it'll be number 9, but it'll be like number 9 in speech marks. So it won't be just the number 9. So it still classes as a string. I am wondering if we can treat our string like an array of characters. So we loop through each individual digit that gets sent across to us. And that's how we do it, I want to say. I think this will work. Okay, so if I do game board, game board, and then we place in our X and Y, fine with that, equals, and then board dot, boom. I think this is the method we're going to need. Char at, and then if we place in X, I think that's going to work. Why have I got errors? Because I haven't got a return type, that's fine. So then we need to just put in the return type of game board. Cool. Okay, so produce board works. Well, no, that's not true. Produce board might work. I don't know, I haven't tested it yet. But I'm pretty happy with that. So because of that, I'm going to remove the imp player method, input player. I'm just going to delete it, and I'm going to replace it with input. Yeah. So I think they can be treated exactly the same. So therefore, we will just use the input method instead. Less code, less hassle. Fantastic. This needs to be produce board. Produce board. It's going to take input as its string parameter, which is fine. We're okay with that. And then we have one more error down here, which again is going to be produce board. And it's going to take input as a parameter. Cool, which I'm probably missing the bracket. Nice. Okay, pretty comfortable with that. So now that we've rejigged our input and output, first off, we're probably going to end up doing this in our connection container class as well, because I think I've done a similar error whereby we've got multiple input and output instances, and we need to change that. What do we need to do now? I think first and foremost we need to reconfigure output. so that the parameter is the basic string, because I think that's going to be easier. So we're going to change string to s. And what that means is all we need to do is we're going to need to load up the game board as a string. So it's basically, it's going to be the reverse of this method here. So it's going to go the other way. So we're going to want, we're going to want to redo this method here that works in reverse. String. So what we'll do is we'll rename these, I think. So what we're going to have is we're going to have a board to array, if I can spell array, and we're going to have a board to string. Yeah, quite happy with that. I think this also might remove some of the other methods that we have. Possibly print board might go. No, it won't. Okay. So board to array and board to string. So either the board is going to be converted into an array and returned, or it's going to be converted to a string and returned from an array. Yeah, so that should be fine. So what I'm going to do, first of all, I'm going to have to do board to array. Cool. And again, board to array. Sick. And then it's just here that we need to do our board to string. So we're going to do board string, and then we're going to pass it a parameter. We're going to pass it array. Cool. And then we're going to do game board. Nice. Cool. Okay, so this is going to work the other way. So board is our previous data type, and game board is our new data type. That's the convention. So we've got a string. Oh, I have typed that wrong. Sick. We'll put in this return game board, just make life easier. And then what we're going to do. So first of all, we're probably going to need 2 for loops again. So that's just a quick and easy copy and paste. There we go. Oh, I hate it when it does that. Okay, so we copy and pasted the for loops. What do we need to do? Game board dot. Can we add? No, okay. Can we just do then game board plus equals board x and y? I don't know. Is that going to work? I'm not sure. Convert, yeah, okay, that's probably a better way of doing it. Okay, so string builder is very similar to a string. It's just the methods are a bit more, it's got a few more bits and pieces to it. So like the append. So we could do plus equals, but I don't think that's going to work properly. So append seems to be the way to go. I'm happy with that. I think that means that at least our rejigging process is done. So we have a basic input and output method, both of which one takes a string, one returns a string. So we're operating on the same data type, which makes things easier for me to follow. We then have our conversion methods. So what that means is we've now got everything necessary to interact with our server correctly. We just need to actually call those methods at the right time in order to receive that information. So in order to do that, we need to have a look at our game logic. When we connect to the socket, what is the first thing that's going to happen? That's a very good question. What is the server going to send us at the moment? Right, connections. So I think it's going to write connections first and foremost, which is down here. Okay, so that doesn't involve any interaction with our player. I think actually the first thing that we're going to receive is going to be our do you want to reconnect our output to client method. So I think what we can do, this is going to be tricky. So in my head, right, the client connects and the server is going to be, it'll run through write connection without any interaction to the client. This is all internal. This is auditing kind of maintenance mumbo jumbo, not important to the client. It's then going to go on to save connection. And this is the first point at which it's going to communicate with the client, which is important. So that means it's going to trigger output to client before our connection container object is actually created. So on the client side, that means that we're going to be receiving data before we receive data here. So in order to deal with that, what we need to do is I think we need to have an input method up here. Okay, so lastly, we need to set up our client so that it can receive the input from the server if it finds a game. It will find a game, well, no, it will send output, I think, regardless. Not at the moment, but it's going to. That needs to be changed. And that's going to be the first output that we receive from our server, is going to be whether or not you have a saved game. So we need to have this response set up as the first thing that we're waiting for when the server boots. So if you can see the order of the loops. So you have you got a saved game? It's going to be the first one. Then it's going to be are you player 1 or player 2, and then it's going to be receiving a game board. So all of that is going to be handled in that order. That is probably going to need some tweaks, but we'll work on it. So for now, we need to set up a while loop, and that is going to say while response dot equals, we're going to say blank. So while response is empty, while we haven't received anything, then we want to wait for input. So we're going to set response equal to input. So every time that this isn't populated, it's going to go back round and it's going to call the input method again until we receive something. Next, we're going to put in a statement to determine what that input is. Again, at the moment, this isn't a complete working solution because I found there are bugs in the code. So this is just partial. This is kind of the groundwork. Once I've debugged everything, we'll probably come back to this and complete it fully. So if you try and run this code at the moment, this will break. Just a heads up. So response equals, we're going to say yes. So we're going to change what we're receiving from the server. So if the server finds a connection, it's just going to send across Y, and if it doesn't, it's going to send across N. And then we'll be able to make our decisions based off of that. So if response equals yes, then what do we want to do? We want to say, okay, well, do you want to continue your saved game? want to continue your saved game. Mark y/n or v, that works too. We've got that there. We're going to make a scanner. So this is going to be, again, it's going to be used for receiving console input. This will become more sophisticated when we build a graphical user interface. But for now, I'm choosing it with a scanner. So that's that. We're then going to set response equal to scanner.nextLine. There we go. And then finally, we're going to send that response back to our server. So just to reiterate, this will not work. This code on its own isn't flawed, I don't think, but there are a couple of bits. I think it's to do with the output client and the fact that that isn't always executed. I think it's causing our client applications to hang. So I think some of this is going to need to be tweaked. But I think it's definitely worth getting in because it's an accurate representation of how systems are actually developed. So you'll go so far and you'll find bugs, you have to make tweaks and stuff and then carry on and that kind of thing. So this code is kind of ahead in terms of the fact that we've got this extra stuff in place, but it doesn't actually work yet. So, but you know, I think it's better to give you an honest reflection of what it is that we've actually got going on, as opposed to sort of faking it and being like, oh yeah, you know, every line I wrote made perfect sense every time. It's like, no. When I ran this, it completely crashed. The server didn't pick up anything. None of the clients displayed a board game. So, and you'll find that out if you want to risk it and you want to run it, go for it. It's not going to break your computer, but it's going to look like you don't know what you're doing. Anyway, so this copy of the code won't be uploaded to GitHub. After the testing video, I'll upload the working copy. If you'd also like to like, comment, and subscribe, that would be really handy. Help support the channel. And if you've got any questions, please comment down below. I will see you guys in the next video.